The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining session 2 of the Lean Into the Community webinar series. I'm going to wait for about a minute to 2 minutes to make sure that we have some more attendees join before we get started. So just hold tight for about 2 minutes, please. All right, well, more people are joining. I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for attending session 2. The first session was a really good session and had the Deputy Director of the SBA programs coming in to talk about the different federal programs that are available with the PPP and the EIDL. I thought this was a good session to have right after that one because we have 2 guests today that will be talking about what you could potentially still be doing right now, when you're looking at your business, whether it be reorganizing, whether it be you're getting this lump sum of money now, and whether or not that's going to actually help you to move forward and to thrive, versus if you're still facing financial hardship with your business, what are some things that you could be doing, including what are the procedures and the policies around layoffs with employees. After we have our 2 panelists talk a bit, please, while they're talking or even afterwards, fill up the question box so that we can make sure that we get your questions answered. And if you want to, if it's difficult to do a typed in question, if you want to raise your hand, I'll unmute you and you can ask your question live. We are recording the session, so if people have not been able to attend in person, they can look at this later. So just be aware of that when you're asking questions. And also at the end, Rosanne Ford, the president of Midstate Chamber of Commerce, will give an update about what the chamber is doing during this time and if she's heard any updates. With that, I'm going to go to the next slide. I'm your host, Wendy Austin. I have a business here in Connecticut called WSI Healthy Digital Solutions. I do digital marketing. I joined the Chamber of Commerce in February. Didn't have a chance to really introduce myself in a networking event, so I'm kind of using this opportunity to introduce myself as well as helping out the community. And for today, our expert panelists are Neil Crane and Eddy LeBron. Neil Crane is an attorney in the law offices of Neil Crane, and he will be talking to you a bit about financial hardship with your business, as well as what you should be thinking of with the government programs and the money that you may be getting. Neil?
Thank you, Wendy. Good afternoon, everyone. As she said, I'm Neil Crane. I run a law firm primarily based in New Haven County, but also across Connecticut for the last 35 years. And we specialize in consumer and small business reorganizations. A lot of what we do as analysts and attorneys in the field of small business financial problems is probably very applicable and useful at this time, given the business slowdown or shutdown and the resulting recovery package that many small businesses have applied for. Obviously, when we're talking about small business, there's a lot of diversity in the operations of small business, but all of them are going to be, in some way, if they're non-essential, are going to be impacted by COVID. That impact is going to be different depending on different types of businesses. There's an unlimited variety of small businesses. There's going to have to be customized treatment of proper responses. Some of the customization is essential in solving all small business problems, but there are also going to be some general patterns to the hardship and the proper advice today and as we move forward in reopening and also the utilization of resources that we may receive in this so-called bailout of small business. Overall, there is a lot of diversity in business, and this package is somewhat of a one-size-fits-all type of bailout, so that presents some certain challenges to all of us. Regardless of what type of business we have, we're all going to be challenged by that. You've got certain businesses that are going to run on straight money for services. I would include restaurants and retail, where it's cash for services, and we've had perhaps a shutdown in any revenues, and then you're going to have some gradual startup, but it's going to be significantly different than other types of businesses where they may be based more on accounts receivable, work in progress. There's a time frame, a lag between work and money. We've got basically, purchase orders from sales. Procuring materials is going to be a challenge. Financing production. Then we've got delivery, and ultimately, in that type of a business, payment. Regardless of similarities, this is going to be, for most people, a fairly catastrophic shock. It's way beyond even the most significant of snowstorms. And so as a result, we're all going to have to be, as small business owners, captains of the ship, look forward and be particularly vigilant in making an assessment of the nature of our business, what's happened to our business, and how to best respond as we proceed. The funding itself has certain inherent problems in the sense that we're dealing in many ways off the same basic model, even across widely varying businesses and the conduct of different businesses. I think, basically we've got a calculation that is a reimbursement that is in itself somewhat inaccurate to varying degrees. It's based on a year, a past year. To some people who are seasonal, we really don't have a seasonal component to it. It's 1 year divided equally, and it's also based on expenses, and that's not exactly how we run all of our businesses. Yet for anyone that is in a non-essential business and they're in a fight for their life reorganization at this time, this is kind of a BCAD moment, and we need to be able to take advantage of that as best we can, because the future of our businesses may really depend on decisions that we make now and how we utilize some of the avenues for recovery. everyone's about to get, or many people are about to get a promised government check. It's a large amount. It may not be, to some people's mind, big enough, but it's still a dangerous amount. I'm concerned, as someone who deals in this field, that this comes as a lump sum check that for most business owners are not accustomed to. And I would caution people that we need to be super careful with this money as you start up. It's not the average form of a check. We're become very good at running our businesses either day to day, week to week, month to month. This is almost like a one-time infusion of capital, and it's got inherent dangers in the receipt of that money. Uncertainty is a large problem that all of us are going to face. We always face that in business, but we're always looking to try to create certainty in our business. Patterns in the past, patterns going forward. This is a whole new game. I would say that in terms of approach, I think the first step in any reorganization, and certainly in this reorganization that you're about to run your companies through, you've got to make a really solid analysis of where you were at when things closed down or when we reopen. Where are your bills and the status of those bills? Where are your revenues and the status of those revenues? I'm in this business for about 35 years, so I can safely say that for some companies, these problems have already existed. They've needed attention. They've been an ongoing battle, perhaps within the office of business principals. And for some companies, these are problems that already existed and were a challenge before. The problems that I deal with most often are related to overburdening debt and servicing debt that cripples a business into becoming non-profitable. When we look at debt problems, we need to separate out different types of debt and how we approach them. In particular, I think one of the basic splits in debt for companies, and again, I've got to be overly broad because there's all different types of companies out there, but you're going to have, for many companies, we're going to have vendor debt, and we're going to have institutional financing. When it comes to institutional financing, a lot of that may be personally signed, and as I run through this business cycle prior to the shutdown, I'm finding that a lot of it is difficult to pay in even the best of times because a lot of businesses are suffering from a lack of affordable, sensible business loans, and this has been true since the meltdown or just after the 2008 meltdown. And what's happened is we see more and more high interest so-called business debt, which is actually less business loans and more what we would consider personal debt, like personal loans, credit cards, funding companies, companies that provide direct withdrawals from business accounts. These have hampered business overall in this climate prior to the COVID disaster, but those are going to become even more important because we're not really getting, with small exception, are we getting money for debt service. And any money that we take from these resources that we may receive and put towards debt service is a real danger point, and we need to be really careful how we're going to prioritize these debt payments. Just going into this, in particular, there's different types of reactions that creditors might have in the event of non-payment. And to some degree, we've had a break for certain businesses. We've had a break in payment because we're, in some instances, just closed. And as a result, we're not getting collections. Just speaking about the court system, the state court is significantly closed, and nothing in the collections realm is going to move forward at this time. So lawsuits are halted. but we've also had a halting in, vendors calling for money, institutional creditors calling for money. So there's been a hiatus in payments. It's not going to last forever, but it has happened. And as a result, we want to be really careful about what we prioritize when things reopen to whatever degree, and where are we going to place money, because it's generally not a good idea to just pay whoever screams the loudest. And what we've really got to do is have an overall plan laid out in advance, categorized, subcategorized, and really carefully looked at, so that good decisions can be made about what debts are going to be paid. Vehicle loans, for instance, non-payment of a vehicle loan, that can be a very immediate collection action, whether it's a truck, a regular, more consumer type vehicle. Those loans can be pulled quickly. Those vehicles can be repossessed quickly. There's no judicial process necessary, and those are very high priorities for anybody who is not able to pay a vehicle loan. They've got to be really, really careful that those vehicles aren't lost immediately when things do start to get collected again, and especially since that does involve the court system. Machinery loans, on the other hand, are probably very negotiable. They're hard to move, they're hard to repossess, no one wants equipment back, and although we may be dealing with people that are in less affected areas of the country, equipment loans and those types of machinery loans are generally much more flexible and easier to negotiate and adjust. I think you also want to take a look at what debt is personal. A lot of principals in a business are going to be personally liable on institutional debt. They may be personally liable on vendor debt, particularly what we call captive vendor debt, where you've got to go to a certain vendor, be that a Nike in the shoe business or a certain provider of alcohol in the restaurant business. Debt that is signed personally as a guarantor or straight principal can affect your credit. And I think one of the things that we should all do is take a look at our credit. There's 3 basic bureaus. They can be tapped into quickly without affecting your score. Fortunately, I think we'll find that a lot of the crossover debt, meaning consumer debt that's used for business or straight business debt, will probably not be reporting on your credit report, and as a result, you may be able to hold off on that without impacting your credit. And one of the things that we look at when we're reorganizing is that by definition, really something probably is not going to get paid on time. And the gist of it is, how do you prioritize that? And I think that's true all the time. It's particularly true now because a lot of this stuff has already not been paid on as we move forward into weeks and months. And despite efforts to try to get the credit reporting industry to adjust through legislation in Congress recently, that did not pass. And there's been no commitment from the 3 reporting agencies to sort of give everybody a pass on this period. They've promised that they may scale this differently later, but it's still a concern, and you should look at your credit reports in advance and do what you can to not affect things that are being reported on your credit. Tax obligations are going to be important, folks. They're personal. Very often they're personal, and I think while they're possible to work out with taxing authorities, despite the fact that the state revenue services can be difficult, they're still negotiable at times, and they're still generally not reporting on your credit. And it may be possible to make arrangements with them, but we want to be careful because it's a dangerous form of debt. It yields high interest. It has personal liability, and for certain folks, unfortunately, we may not pull out of this in the fashion that we'd like to. And then the question is going to become, what do you do to recover personally in the future or reorganize your business in the future that doesn't completely wreak havoc permanently with your life through direct responsibility for trust fund taxes, sales tax being one, payroll tax being another. Government taxing authorities on the federal level, I find, are probably going to be hard to reach, but they're not particularly speedy. And I don't think they're going to wreak havoc with your business right off the bat if you don't already have existing problems. If you do have existing problems, I think we'll get some kind of hiatus to deal with that, because forcing people out of business in order to collect debts that at this time are unpayable is not going to add to anyone's
So Neil, I have a couple
collectability.
of questions at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So you were talking about what you should be paying or not paying, and there's a question around, you'd mentioned the prioritization. Can you give a quick summary about what they should be paying right now versus not paying it with their business?
Well, I think, Wendy, what we're getting at is you're going to have, institutional debt, which is financial companies, whether it's Visa, MasterCard, Bank of here, Bank of there. Those are going to come into play quickly because they may already be behind. So in those cases, yes, like I was just discussing, you want to look and see, what can you not pay? Like I said, vehicle loans are going to happen quickly. Look at what's being reported on your credit so that you don't hamper your credit if you can avoid it. The other major category, Wendy, is going to be vendors. And so in looking at vendors, you want to look at, who do you owe? And sometimes more importantly, how important are these to your future operations? So it's going to be about prioritizing that payment in accordance with a variety of factors, where someone's not going to get paid, but how can you do that in a manner that's not crippling to your future and allows you to fund future operations?
Okay. And then another question here, are there any protections within the legislation that is passed at the national level to give relief to business owners who have personal guarantees?
I have not seen anything that deals on the debt side of this calamity. Even the forms that you're filling out, have to do with expenses like rent, payroll, general operations. For some businesses, they're already giving up perhaps too much money to past old debt. And so we haven't seen yet relief from that. It does get somewhat complicated because a lot of this is crossover debt, meaning that it's utilized for business, but it's really issued more similarly to consumer debt, where it's applications without real of books and records and tax returns. So you need to look, when you're looking at your package of money that you may receive, you need to look at, what you qualified and how do you stick with the script that procured that money, and how do you spend it and compared to how do you qualify for it. I think in all events, everybody's about to do a mini reorganization, and we need to take advantage in some ways of the stoppage on payments and the opportunities to reorganize as you go forward.
All right, thank you. And if anybody has any questions for Neil, if you can just type those into the question box and or raise your hand if you want to have me unmute your mic. And Neil, was there anything else that you wanted to tell everyone before we?
No, I think my advice to everybody is, as small business owners, we've always had to be out in front, and I realize that there's a lot of stress on everybody. We've all got responsibilities. We're hardworking people in this state, and part of this is just going to be staying focused and putting on a good, keeping positive, and do your analysis sometimes quietly. And not share all of your own worries with everybody in your office, and stay as the leader of your business. There's nothing wrong with getting advice from people, but I think a lot of this should be done in a quiet environment where your phones are not ringing and you have an opportunity to really drill down and be as detailed and specific as possible when it comes to who's going to get addressed with these upcoming resources.
Okay, thank you. And then again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them into the question area. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Eddy LeBron, who will talk a bit around, the employment management, what you may need to think about in terms of laying off employees or keeping employees.
Thank you very much, Wendy, and thank you, Neil. That's a perfect segue to the way I wanted to start off. And great job, by the way. Great facts. And agree with you on so many levels. Unfortunately, to everybody in and on the webinar, I apologize that we have to meet under these circumstances, but hey, let's not accept this as the new normal. Let's just deal with it temporarily. It's kind of how I'm going with it. So Eddy LeBron, business sales executive with Paychex, human capital management, helping businesses from hire to retire. So covering the layoff that is unfortunate right now, the first thing I want to speak about is you want to be honest and transparent with your staff. Your employees may be expecting cutbacks. They may be feeling nervous about the layoff decision. And like Neil said, be the leader of your business and make them feel comfortable. It's important to provide them with the reassurance, noting that employees should emphasize that they're carefully explore all options. There's no other alternative but a layoff or a furlough. You may even wish to share numbers with them and go through what Paychex puts together in our HR program is a layoff checklist. And this is one of the handouts that I gave to Wendy. And it starts off with, make sure you go through the reasons of the layoff. Is the layoff imperative or could possibly a reduction in hours so meet the needs? Any contractual commitments and a person's being laid off or parties to employment, any commissions or any structures like that you need to go through. That's something that you want to cover before you lay somebody off. You also want to make sure you provide clarity around the benefits with the employees. Pay may be suspended, but healthcare benefits may still remain in place. Sometimes it's vice versa, as the other way around. Number of people's involved or departments involved in the layoff is in the restaurant industry right now. There unfortunately isn't a need for the wait staff. So that's a department that is unfortunately down, but you do have maybe hosts or management that are taking the phone orders and taking the online orders. They're the ones that are bringing the food outside to the curbside. So that department is still open for work. Obviously, the chefs and the kitchen staff are going to still be open. So you want to separate it by departments. Is it a full layoff, a full furlough, or maybe just a few departments are coming off? Use objective layoff criteria. You must use objective criteria: performance, seniority, job elimination, particular skills needed by the company, and determining which employees need to be laid off to avoid claims of discrimination or etc. Layoff policy. If you're with a payroll provider or a human capital management provider, you might want to consult with your HR generalist. At Paychex right now, we are being swarmed with these HR calls and unemployment calls, and we're being tasked with reaching out to our current clients to help them in these situations. So, sales numbers are off the table. Right now, it's help the clients, build rapport with the clients, and be there for them more importantly. You want to give an advance notice. You don't want to tell somebody that it's Thursday and tomorrow or today is your last day. Give yourself, the company, the business, and the employee, more importantly, a notice of advancement. How long is it going to go into place? If you're going to do a temporary, maybe 30-day shutdown or anything of those matters. Voluntary separation. Find out whether anyone wishes to quit voluntary, especially right now because of this virus. Some mothers want to be home with their families and with their kids, and that's something that is considered a voluntary separation. They can be separated from the business. Seniority. Compile a seniority list to consider whether seniority is to be one of the criteria used to determine who is laid off, i.e. valuable employees is what you're looking for to help you during these times, and also for you to help them during these times. Company property. Do you have laptops, tablets, cell phones? If you're going to lay somebody off, unfortunately, they're technically not allowed to do work-related emails and calls during the layoff. So that's property that you're going to need to get back, or else if they do answer an email or a phone call and do some voluntary work, it technically is on the books and they should be paid for that, and they can fight you on that. Benefits. You want to make arrangements regarding medical, life insurance, COBRA, and so on. There's Affordable Care Act right now being given right now. So any information that you can provide to your employees is nothing more than valuable information. Outplacement services. Considered using an outplacement service. If you're not using such a service, consider offering workshops to help finding them a job, help them with building a resume and interviewing. Just because your restaurant or your industry isn't working right now doesn't mean that somebody else is working. Unemployment insurance, something that we're talking about right now. Provide the employees with the information on how to collect. You as a business owner, if you have a provider like Paychex or other companies in the industry, they're most likely covered under the unemployment insurance, meaning we will be the conduit between the Department of Labor and you as the business owner. We're going to make sure the rates are given correctly, the taxes are done correctly. We're going to make sure that when the employee says that they're making this much an hour and working this many hours a week, we're going to provide the valuable information that's needed to prove that correct or prove it wrong, so you're not out of money here. Any questions at this point, Wendy?
I do have a question, but it came in for Neil. Were you done with your talk?
I could do a little bit more. I just wanted to pause for questions to see if there was anything that was brought up. If it's for Neil, feel free.
So Neil, this one's for you, and I'll paraphrase, but there's a small restaurant owner that they cannot pay the rent, and the landlord is already threatening to evict them. Since they're personally liable, they're asking, how long do you think I can operate without being evicted? Right now, there's no indication that they're going to get the PPP loan, and they may face bankruptcy.
Evictions, you can start an eviction at any time after the non-payment of what's usually a monthly rent. Up until very recently, and I'm talking about days ago, there had been service of evictions, meaning sheriffs were serving evictions, but the court's not open. So while they may get started, they can't go anywhere. The next thing is, as of maybe yesterday or today even, we're not seeing foreclosure service, collection service by sheriffs. We're not seeing eviction service this week. So I would say to people who have business leases, you have time. Don't give up. Even in the best of times, evictions are 3 to 4 months. They look scary when they come out because they say get out in 10 minutes, but that's not really the case. The landlords can be very pressy in commercial circumstances, more so even than consumer, residential. But I think in normal circumstances, you have 3 to 4 months. In circumstances like we have now, I think it's going to go closer to 5 or 6. None of those state courts are open, so I don't know how they're going to do anything. I work in the USA courts, and they're open by phone. So I think you do want to get help, particularly with restaurants because they're so location-based. But in any retail business or any business in general, there is time to cure an eviction. So hang in there, and there's certainly things that lawyers like myself in this business can do to fix broken leases.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say that, if you're looking at real financial hardship, now might be the time to talk to a professional to find out if there's other options and other avenues to help your overall business and not just one aspect of it. Eddy, I do have a question that perhaps you can answer. Should I keep employees on payroll if I don't think we'll be at full capacity when we open again?
Mhm.
If because employees are on payroll doesn't mean they have to necessarily be paid. So if you have, especially in this PPP initiative that's going on right now, you can't lay your employees off and use that money for payroll. So kind of double-sided. I have businesses right now that are closing their doors and they've agreed on paying $1,000 to their employees to cover their split hours because it would be more than the layoff. I also have businesses that are fighting the layoffs right now because they're getting less money than they're supposed to. The $600 hasn't started yet, so now they're coming out of their pocket to help pay for their employees.
All right, thank you. I don't have any other questions at this point, so Eddy, if you still had something to discuss, go ahead.
Just a couple of things that I wanted to touch on in the work environment, adding to, owning up to your business and being the leader. After a layoff or a furlough, make sure you stay in touch and provide mental and emotional support with your employees. It's something big and it shows that you really care as much as you should. Communicating with employees during a temporary layoff will show the world for everything. Make sure you don't discriminate. And I wanted to briefly touch on the PPP information. This is a fully forgiven loan, I'm sure most of you are aware about. As long as the funds are provided in the form of loans that will be fully forgiven when used for payroll costs, interest on mortgages, rent, utilities, due to likely high subscription or at least 75% of the forgiven amount must have been used for payroll. Any loan payments will also be deferred for 6 months. No collateral or personal guarantees are required. Neither the government nor lenders will charge small businesses any fees for this. Must keep employees on the payroll or rehire quickly. All small businesses are eligible with 500 or fewer employees. I'm sure everybody is aware in these handouts there that Wendy has provided, there is the actual application and the overview sheet. And if anybody has any questions on eligibility, anything from the bank side, I would more importantly reach out to your bank because they are the ones that are in control of almost everything right now. If you have your payroll reports and your quarterlies in order, it is all in the bank's hands right now.
All right, thank you. If there's no other questions, I'm not seeing any in the question box. Oh, there is a raised hand. Hold on. Doug, I will unmute your mic. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I have a question for Eddy. Eddy, how are you? Do you know anything
Good,
about
how are you?
Good. You know anything about student loan forgiveness?
I do not.
Neil, do you have an answer for Doug?
I think there's a moratorium on payment. There's a huge number of student loans that aren't being paid anyhow, so I'm not sure that that's going to alleviate a crunch. So it's a moratorium on payments. There's nothing on forgiveness. That's been discussed as part of the political referendum that predates this COVID disaster. but I don't see any forgiveness of student loan debt. And I think, if there's a type of debt that, as you're prioritizing, because something for most of us is not going to get paid, that's probably a good one not to pay, because there's so many programs available. Income-based repayment is the primary one that can be done online, but there's so many programs, and the enforcement for defaulted student loan debt is close to zero right now.
Thank you. Eddy, this one is likely for you. We talked a bit about this morning, actually. So have any small businesses been given the PPP loans yet in Connecticut?
I've heard of 2 companies as of one this morning, actually, on our BNI, and one yesterday, that everything was accepted and they're expecting it like by Wednesday, Thursday, and that was communicated from the bank. And that's one thing that, Wendy, when we were talking this morning in BNI, it is huge for you to have a good relationship with your bank. If you have a loan officer or a good point of contact, they are your right-hand person right now.
And just to tack on to that, the point around the processing of these loans is really the amount of applicants that are getting given to these different banks. Anecdotally, we've heard that the smaller kind of credit union local banks are doing much better than the bigger, larger banks. So again, it does go back to that relationship. So some of the smaller local banks have the ability to have that one-to-one relationship with you, which really helps in these situations.
Wendy, would you mind if I interjected just
Yes.
at this point while we're on the topic?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Rosanne Ford, president of the Midstate Chamber. Thanks for joining us today. But while we're on the topic of the SBA loans, and we are hearing it a lot here at the Midstate Chamber from members inquiring, be assertive, be persistent. Even some of our members, that have banking relationships, for one reason or another, they did run into a couple of roadblocks. And in the end, they ended up talking to another local bank and were able to open up a business account, and then were I don't want to say, then they were able to apply for the loan. So I know in one circumstance, one was a very large bank, and the business had a relationship, but he was not hearing back from them. So perhaps that's what Wendy is pointing to. But essentially in the end, this individual was able to have success with another bank opening up a new account just this week. And also, check with different institutions. I think at this point it is up to the banker that you're talking to, but certainly don't give up, because it is certainly worthwhile to help everybody in the situation right now.
Okay, thank you. And I don't have any other questions or hands raised. So Rosanne, do you want to go ahead and close?
Sure. I just wanted to, again, remind folks of, the array and amount of resources that are out there, and they can be mind-boggling at times, but take small bites. The Midstate Chamber has a resource page for businesses that includes, some local information, some state information, and federal information, and that is, at midstatechamber.com on the news tab. So you can find a lot out there. Also, Eddy, when you were talking about folks that might be displaced currently and on unemployment and not sure of, what the future may hold at their businesses that they were laid off from, our friends at the Workforce Alliance, the Regional Workforce Development Board, are another great resource. All of their services are free, whether it be for the employee seeking work or the employer that's looking to hire. And we do plan on scheduling some job fairs when the time is right, when we are able to gather together again. And we will be working with the Workforce Alliance on that. But Wendy included some of their questions in the survey that she did send out. So a lot of resources are around. We just really have to look at all of them and see what works best for us. And I appreciate you, Wendy, for putting this series together and coordinating it and recording it. And we will continue to get the word out, and we will be planning some virtual networking sessions in the coming weeks for sure.
Thank you, Roseanne. And with that, just a bit of housekeeping. So after this closes, I will start to convert it into a recording and send that out along with the handouts. So I'll send an email to you with all of the links with that. So if you want to forward it on to others that could not attend today, please feel free to do that. And of course, if you have any questions that occur to you even after the session, you can email those to me, and I'm following up with questions that people have as well. With that, I thank you for joining session 2. Session 3 will be on Friday, with 46% of the survey results coming back with businesses that are still open in some fashion. You know, it's very important to stay on top of what businesses need to know today if they are open, whether that's from how to keep the public safe and healthy to how do you work remotely. So that session is on Friday at 1 p.m. All right, thank you, everyone.